Having a Gas is the podcast that talks to the great and the good of the creative industries, and in particular finds out what makes great music for film, for TV, for commercials, for dancing to, for cooking to, for f***ing to, and more. Today I'm having a gas with Hermeti Balarin, the outgoing creative partner at Mother London. Hermeti and his wife Ana have been at Mother since 2007, where they rose from interns to ECDs in a record-breaking 8 years. And having set a course for consistent success at Mother, they've now been drafted to lead Wieden and Kennedy Portland. Maybe the greatest independent agency currently in the UK, one that many people I speak to envy the creative output, and a lot of people say it's on their bucket list to work there. And so I suppose the first question is, Hermeti, how did you manage that? Is that down to you and your other half turning it into such a great creative shop, or have you inherited that?
Whoa, if that's your warm-up, I'm just worried about the rest.
That's my opening question.
Well, I mean, it's been going on for much longer than we've been there, even though we've been there for a long time. We had our 14th anniversary just 3 months ago, so it's been a long, long time. And Mother was brilliant before we joined, and we learned like almost every single trick that we know in there. I guess the daunting, the job is always daunting there, because you come in with such a heavy weight on your shoulders for what has happened before. But it became a lot more challenging when we were made the first ever ECDs of the place. That was like, okay, how did this happen, and how the hell we're going to live up to this? And I guess we just, like, the privilege of growing up there, and like career-wise, we had seen it all, like from the bottom up. Like, we started as placement team, and so we started, going up the ladder inside of there. So we've seen every facet, every aspect of it. So we didn't realize how much knowledge we had until we had to put it into action. And it just, a lot of it came really instinctively. We'd never been trained to lead or anything like that. We just learned on the job. And 2 years later, when we got made partners, then we started to actually help run the whole agency. It was a very different kind of challenge. It wasn't coming up with the ideas anymore, although we still are very close to the work, and we come into creative reviews, we write work ourselves. It was about fiddling with the knobs, like very much as in the sound studio, trying to kind of like equalize the beast so it's singing in perfect harmony. So we tried to remove the bad notes or the things that were gone off kind of like over the years. And it was scary as hell, but it was actually very instinctive. It came from the gut. So a lot of it was just like fine-tuning the beast. So we'll take a bit of the credit for retuning it.
Yeah. I love how often we are drawn to musical metaphors, and obviously there was some that were quite very deliberate there, but even fine-tuning, is musical. And I suppose there's a lot that I could ask from even your opening statement there. But I suppose what I'm most interested in is, what does that mean when you said you were fine-tuning it? Can you give examples of the kind of things you had to do to make sure the whole thing was singing in one chorus?
Well, like when we took over the creative department, it was like it's an independent agency where the founder comes to work every day still, so had never given the reins to anyone else. So that was a big chunk of how to manage that transition, how to make, how to stamp our mark, but keep him involved and feel like this relationship is also harmonious. I'm going to continue with some musical until I run out of vocabulary. Yeah. So that one was a tricky one, like very precious about it. He is like proud of it, a lot of legacy and everything. So that was a very tricky bit to figure out how our relationship works, how we have enough space, how we actually stamp our own personal edge to it. That was one side. The other side was like, I think it was in particular a challenge to Mothers. I think it's the whole ad industry going through such dramatic change, the whole landscape changing around us, media revolution and social media, and everything is up in the air. Nobody knows what's going to land. Digital this, digital that, rules, vertical. unskippable, 6 seconds. So all of those things, it made for a much more difficult day to day, like to figure out where the big juicy wins were going to be. So I think it was, as every other agency, scratching its head and a bit annoyed, a bit resentful, trying to figure out how the hell are we going to continue to make outstanding work in a landscape like this that is so volatile, changes every day. So it was quite an angry place. I think the whole industry was. So I think I'll stereotype for a second here, but like being Brazilians and growing up in a country where unless you're optimistic, like you're going to be very depressed. Like we just took that on our stride. We said like, this is nothing. I'll just give you a glimpse of how dramatic it is in Brazil. Like this is easy. So we just went to kind of soothe, kind of calm the nerves and just try to get people to be less on the edge, less pressurized. Just like really a bit of sunny disposition to get all of that anger and frustration with everything that was changing and make it like, come on, this is a lot of fun. We come up with ideas. We choose great music to go with our ideas. This is a dream job. Let's go and have some fun. And I think that you speak to agencies like, or like especially independent creative agencies that are really fiercely focused on creativity. They'll always say like culture. The culture is what creates the work. So that's what we did. We just worked on the culture bit because we knew that everybody is so talented. The minute they started loving their jobs and understood that it was going to be a little bit harder, yes, but they could still make some incredible work, I think you started to change. So that fine tuning was that the founder, how the hell does it feel happy and proud and let's go? And people, how the hell do they feel super happy again, proud, excited, challenged? So that was the fine tuning.
And it sounds like if I'm interpreting things correctly, you took over the role in the midst of all the chaos of the media landscape changing, which caused a bit of anxiety for a lot of the creatives because it sounds like there was familiarity and comfort with creating ideas that were for TV, radio, and print. And then all of a sudden you've got this landscape of exploding media space and no one yet knows how it works, whether you can monetize it, how effective it is. And so that sounds like a very stressful time to be taking over the creative department.
Yeah, I guess that's why it's always easier if you can appoint from within, because bringing someone from the outside to try and figure out the culture, to try and figure out how to make that work and learn everything. So I guess that bit of the stress didn't exist. We knew everybody, we had worked with everybody. So that was a bit of what can be really difficult to run a place, to get to know it. We didn't have to. The other bit that was changing and volatile, like seismic changes happening, we had to contend and deal with a bit of that as creatives and creative directors as well. So we weren't completely raw and alien to any of that. I guess we always had a bit of curiosity beyond the traditional medium. Don't get me wrong, I love making film. Like it's a dream. I love making radio, I love making out of home. The traditional stuff is a dream. But I also love like AR and VR. Like when I was able to sell the first AR idea to a client, it was mesmerizing. Everything was new, it was fresh, it was different, and it was exhilarating. So yeah, some of the formats that we have to deal with are brutal, but they can make for really interesting challenges as well. So it was very, very stressful, but it was with a bit of optimism. I think it was actually quite exciting. Like we're making like a global AR piece like this. When does that happen? Like that's a blessing as well. Let's embrace this.
Yeah, it would be as exciting for a creative person. If you find novelty endearing and you're excited by new potential and new opportunity, to be able to step into a new format for the first time it's either going to be very anxiety inducing because too much potential and no clear roadmap can produce anxiety. But it can, the flip side of that is that it can also be the best opportunity because no one has written the rule book yet. So you get to try things and see how it works. You get to be the pioneers in that space.
Very true. Very true. I think it's it is daunting, like, because there is comfort in seeing what has come before and figuring out how you're going to break some of the rules of something that has lots of rules around it. But it's also really, it's really, really fun to go into uncharted waters. Just figure out as you go. And when you do so, it's also really, humbling that you've done something very, very new, that you've got some new moves now. Very, very fulfilling at times.
So that's where we are now. And I always like to go back to the beginning, if we're talking about uncharted territory, which is to say, I always like to know where it all started and what got you on the path to being, ECD. How did you get into the industry?
I'm one of those freaks that, like, from a very young age, me and my younger brother, in Brazil is notorious for like good advertising, and it's got a really vibrant industry. Not so much lately, but when I was growing up, it was the golden era of Brazilian advertising. It was putting Brazil on the map abroad. It was like export material good.
Is it the 90s?
It's like it's kind of like late 80s, 90s. There was a lot of incredible stuff happening there. And I remember at the time there was loads of jingles, and they were absolutely kind of like infectious. Like they were well written, they were well composed, well recorded. There were real, genuine, great pieces of music. And I just grew up like absolutely addicted to them. We would just walk around, me and my brother, just singing them. We memorize all of them. We just go around singing. I just realized, maybe as I grew up, so like, that's a job. Like, people come up with those things, so I want to do that.
Yeah.
And then I never deviated from that. And then I went to university to study advertising back home, and I got my first placement at quite a famous Brazilian agency, where I met this senior art director that had just come back from Europe. He had done a stint in London. He had done placements. He was quite a senior guy. He has done a placement at Saatchi's in London and a placement at Weiden's in Amsterdam. And he had come back. I think he came as a junior. He went back and leapfrogged everybody. His skills were insane. He spent a year abroad. And he said to me, like, man, just do this. Just do for a year, and then you leapfrog everyone. Like, everybody here is gunning like for a bit of experience abroad. There's not a lot of people here that have had that. You've got I got an Italian citizenship. It was like, it's a no-brainer. So I got my portfolio, I got all my savings. I proposed to Ana, who is the other ECD and partner, and because we were going out for a long time, we're high school sweethearts. And I said to her, hang in there. I'm gonna go to London and I'm gonna get a placement. And when I come back, we get married and I'll get a great job. Because at the time I was only getting placements in Brazil. Oh, what a rude awakening it was. I came and it struggled, nothing worked, nobody liked my book. I had to go back to square one. But I learned the industry, and I learned like that there were loads of great agencies. But I learned about the likes of Mother and Widen's. And in Brazil is less like they were less known, I suppose, because they're more cultish, less like they were smaller. So I started to learn about these guys and study everything about them. And I said, like, wow, okay, now my dream has updated. I want to work on those places. And a long story short, Ana was working in the NHS. She was a physio, but she was a brilliant writer. My partner at the time wasn't working out. She was just too lazy. And then I couldn't wait any longer. I said, like, broke up with a old copywriter. I really liked her, but she wasn't on the same wavelength. And I said to Ana, I'm going to propose to you for the second time. I know you're not happy at your job, and you like what you do, but you don't love it. I need a writer. You're a great writer. Come and work with me for a bit. We'll freelance. We'll find gigs, and we'll pay rent. And if you hate it, you go back and do something else. But I know you're going to quit your job, so come and do it with me. And she came, and it was just like a lightning strike. Our book just took a leap into a different level, and we took a few placements on not so glamorous places, but one day mother called and said, like, do you guys want a placement here? And we said, like, wow, okay. And as a divine intervention, it looks like it now, a brief landed on our desk on the first day. And mother is really good at this because it does give briefs, spectacular briefs to placements. It doesn't give you like just these shitty little small ones on the side. It gave us, at the time, Boots was the biggest client in the agency, and he gave us a Boots brief, which was perfect for us. It was a summer brief, which was like all these beauty routines that women kind of like undergo like when they are getting ready for summer. So with like two Brazilians sitting at mother with a summer brief for Boots, it was the moment we were waiting for. So he had gone around, lots of creative teams, senior creative teams, couldn't crack it. And we just had a moment of inspiration. We sold it at the end of that first week. And then we were in Australia shooting this massive ads like 2 months later with 500 extras. So that's how it started.
Now that is quite the origin story. And I don't think I've heard many origin stories like that were, put together so well. The story actually flows like a great narrative, and it's horrendously romantic. I don't know, maybe this is, I'm just off the top of my head here. I feel like maybe in this country, we're not so keen to expose that kind of, emotionality, or like to tell a grand story. I feel like we like to downplay and, oh, I just did this and no one really cares what I think. And I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. First of all, I'm going to be super thankful for that, because Britishness, Brazilianness is like, I think like I feel like invincible at times, because I got the over emotional side. I can tell a grand story, but I also have the stiffer upper lip. Like, so I got the kind of like the thick skin now. So it's like the vulnerabilities of being Brazilian or Latin American met by the kind of the Britishness, blaseness, kind of like overly critical. It's a dream, really. I have those two brains in my head now, and I go, this is a real gift, because I can think like the Brits, which is, I love it. I fell in love with the British kind of sense of humor, or like almost dismissing greatness, because in Brazil you grow up with kind of like influenced by America a lot, and then it's the opposite, right? Like, how can two countries with the same language be so different? And I love this on the British. It's almost like I had to stop a couple of meetings once because we're midway through this really heavy charged meeting with a big client. And right there and then, it was really gruesome, difficult. Like the work was bombing in research. We were a bit panicking. The clients came from America. They're a mother. We're having this big meeting, presenting new work. And we get the news. So the biz lead on the account get an email from the research that was going on at the time that not only one, but two films have gone through with flying colors. And he delivered the news almost like as in passing, like it says like, oh guys, the scripts just, they scored well. We're going to be making them. And then continue chatting. So then we're going to, I said like, oh, hang on a second. Pause that. Pause. It's 11 a.m., but go grab some beers. Like, we're gonna celebrate this. So then we stop the meeting and we celebrate, because I think that my mission in life here is to teach some of the Brits that come in touch with, like, celebrate the small and the big wins, because it's important. Like, it's really important. And then you teach me to kind of like keep it level, because sometimes I just get too excited and then too frustrated. So that's a deal between us. But I think it served me well, the Brazilian side, because it is Mother is quite an emotional agency. It's got a voice. Its name means something. We got our mothers on the wall. We make work that makes them proud. So it's got a lot of drama in the story of it as well. So yeah, I don't know if I circled back from your question, but I think British plus Brazilian is a dream combination for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what you described there is you don't only have the advantage of being able to think in multiple languages, but you can actually think in different cultures. You know, you can plug them in when it's appropriate. The last guest we had on was a mix engineer called Andrew Sheps, who mixes Beyonce and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And he lives in Worcestershire and goes to the local pub and he says, yeah, everyone there, they don't care what I do. They they take the piss and they just move on, So there's a place for it because, it's always worth it's something of a Protestant kind of Christian idea. There's always stay grounded. You're not that important in the grand scheme of things. And
it keeps you real. It keeps you real for sure. There was a book. Oh God, I'm not going to remember the author, but I just gave it to every Brazilian that we hired because we hired a lot. There's many great creatives in Brazil and art directors and everything. The ones that had the head in the right place were a good fit for Mother. Not the ones that are numbered with ad industry, but the ones that really good we hired. We give this book that's called Watching the English, and it's I think it's an anthropological book. It's so beautiful, and it's written so well. But it's about small talk and talking about the weather, and just almost this overly polite and mindful. Like I keep my space and you keep yours. I don't step into yours. You don't step into mine. It's a beautifully respectful thing. And it took a while to learn, but I genuinely really feel at times that even though I'm flamboyant, big hair Brazilian guy, I'm very British inside.
Yeah. There's, what's that? Watching the English.
Yeah.
Recommended reading.
Yeah, I'll find it. Especially if you're landing here and you need to get an insight into the culture, into the people, into what makes people tick and the idiosyncrasies, the quirks of the Brits. It's a tricky game to try and start writing for. And remember when we started to get it, watching TV and get into comedy and sense of humor and all those things is so peculiar and unique and beautiful, and it's so nuanced, and you have to pay attention to the details. So that book is a real fast track into getting a bit under the skin of the culture of the people, what makes people tick.
Yes, we've. I think this has been spoken about before on the podcast, maybe even on the last one. I always go back to Steve Coogan, who pointed out that in British comedy, we're really enamored with schadenfreude. We like to take pleasure in other people's misery and suffering. So all of our biggest sitcoms are about absolute failures. Basil Fawlty, Alan Partridge, Captain Mannering in Dad's Army, things like this. Miranda. Apart with the exception of maybe Gavin and Stacey, which is very wholesome. Whereas in America, the sitcoms are about usually relatively successful people. You got things like Frasier, the dude's a millionaire. You've got Friends, obviously, that some of them are struggling, but they live in this beautiful kind of Tribeca apartment, don't they?
For sure.
Yeah.
The only glitch in the system there is very controversial opinion, but I think the Yankees were able to take The Office and actually make it a successful adaptation.
Yes.
And run it even further. And that kind of comedy for me it was so painful because it's so alien. It made my actual physical body ache.
Oh, are you thinking of the UK version that's painful?
The UK version, I thought it was genius. I loved every second of it. It wasn't, because it's so, I think, at least my understanding, I think it's so British, kind of the way that it kind of so Americans have tried to photograph and film everything in cinematography to make the US look even more beautiful. The UK loves to find the ugliest spaces and to kind of the back alleys, and it's not afraid to show the kind of warts and all. And for them to take that show and adapt to the US so successfully, it was actually quite a surprising thing. I just found the book, by the way. Kate Fox is the author of Watching the English, The Hidden Rules of English Behavior.
We'll put it on. We'll try and put a link in the description if I remember.
It's got even two people at Wimbledon, with an umbrella. It's kind of it's amazing.
Amazing stuff. And yes, on the Office, it's often been remarked, I think, that that's maybe the a landmark study in comparing the attitudes of Britain and America. And like you say about the warts and all in the UK version, we have the most depressing neon lighting, very sickening to look at and even worse to work in, I imagine. But onto the characters, it's like David Brent is very, very unpleasant and easy to dislike, whereas Michael Scott, the US counterpart, is actually kind of endearing. You like him in the way that you like a child who's trying to do something and failing.
That's very interesting. It's very true as well.
Yeah. So that's some interesting perspective, about the differences in the cultures. But back to the culture of Mother itself, where I've only visited once, and I went into the your beautiful foyer and could almost just fall down on my knees and think, I wish I worked here, because it was palatial and you've got Peter Blake hanging above the desk. And I suppose one of the angles that I was interested in exploring was Mother one of the first places that broke from the tradition of, let's say, naming your agency after the founders? And, for once we have this very pronounced gesture. This is not my name on the door. It's, it can be passed to whoever comes and steps into the helm.
I can't think of many others, if any, to be honest. I think it was, and there's a nice story about it. Like there's an American writer, creative director called Libby Brockhoff. She was one of the original founders with Robert and Mark, and she's the one that came up with the name. And I remember speaking to Robert and then listening to a podcast with Libby, and them questioning that very notion of why it's so self-centered, egotistical, almost this kind of marking territory, just putting my name above the door so you always remember who started.
I am Ozymandias, King of Kings.
Exactly. It's almost as if that's insecure. It comes from insecurity. I want everybody to remember forever after who started this place. And then in the other hand, it's such a missed opportunity. The name Mother has helped us immensely, to remind us of what we are, what we're here for, and it's got an aura to it. It humanizes the thing. It's got a mythical kind of mystique to the thing as well. And when I first brought my mother to Mother, well, your reaction to Mother, that was my same one. When I walked in there to have a book crit, I said wow, okay, there's some people have it better than others. Yeah. And then when I walked in there for the first day of work, I couldn't believe it. Walking up those stairs is actually quite an emotional moment. But bringing my mom to Mother, to that reception, and taking a photograph of her next to her portrait on the wall of Mother's is something very, very special. We have a phone in the agency, like an old school red phone that is kind of wired and one of those little coil kind of cords. It doesn't work anymore. I don't know why. But it was a phone number that only our mothers had. But for whatever reason, they couldn't reach you on the mobile. They would ring the landline if they were worried about you, and somebody would go and find you. And he rang a few times, and it was incredible. So I feel what a kind of surprising thing for people that work in communications, that give names to things, that create words for other companies, to actually name their own companies after themselves. It just feels very counterintuitive to me.
Yeah, and obviously there's a swath of new entries to the marketplace. There's been many since Mother, obviously, but some of the ones that immediately come to mind now are Uncommon.
Lucky Generals,
yeah, very good. What are maybe some others that you have paid attention to? Obviously, New Commercial Arts is very is declaring exactly what they are, isn't it? Straight up.
Yeah, very, very interesting as well. It remains to be seen how what exactly they're going to become, or they are becoming. But it's a very interesting move. They might argue that actually cutting to the chase and just stating what we want to be is actually even maybe even more precise move to at this day and age where there's so much blurredness about like, what are you? Why do we need agencies? Why is this agency going to do for us? Like, what do they do exactly? Full service, one-offs, or like? So, I obviously the people at the in running that are very, very good. So I'm curious to see where that goes. Obviously, Lucky General is a bit older than some of the newcomers, but very, very successful. So it's really interesting the way Lucky General's. I think they embrace their name as well. It feels like a very fun place. I have many, many friends there, so I'm really biased, and I love them. And Uncommon, I wasn't quite sure at first because I thought like the name didn't immediately kind of wow me, but they're making it mean something great. So it's great when people like that come into the industry, disrupting things, keeping everybody on their toes, and just proving that there is a lot of space for, great creative ideas, no matter what the naysayers say.
Yes. And of course, I forgot to mention the number one obvious example being Adam and Eve, despite the fact that they are still names. But yeah. Absolutely.
Another great thing. Yeah. Another great example. I was trying to think of more. I mean, Pablo is another one. Well, what else?
Who, What, Why?
Wonderhood Studios. I think everybody figured out it's a bit naff to name the agency after yourself.
Yes. And as well, you see things happening like if there are clauses during mergers or any kind of legal wrangling over, we have to keep all the names, you end up with AMVBBDO, and you've just got this like Rolodex of names coming in.
Also, it maybe back then, the leaders were the thing. But now it's like, it is so not true. Like, I love the fact that Mother credits every piece of work as Mother. So you don't know who did it, because that's the best story, I think, about the place. From the receptionist that welcomes somebody into the building, like a potential client, a collaborator, a director, like a music person, with a broad smile, offers you coffee or a tea, and like seat and magazine, and makes you feel really good, to the person that takes you to the meeting room, to the people that you meet to talk about the work, to the people that actually welcome you like out and back out again, and everyone in between. They are responsible for the success of the place. So it's so unfair that 2 or 3 founders get all the credit, the repetition of their names. It's a bizarre notion. I think it was a different time. I think people's egos were too big to think collectively, and now people are just a bit more clued into, come on, guys, that's a bit ugly. Let's be generous here.
Yes, I often, as is cliched, I'm sure, I often go back to Mad Men, because I mean I adore Mad Men.
Same.
My brother sent me a photo the other day. The gentleman who plays, my goodness, I've forgotten his name now, the guy with the glasses, Harry Crane, posted photos from the day of the pilot shoot, saying, 2006, on this day we shot the pilot. And I was struck by something, which is that they all looked like they were dressed and hair and makeup done, but they looked like they were in the 21st century. They were posing for selfies like 21st century people. And I realized that I had been so convinced that I was actually watching the 1960s because of the production design that was so thorough on that show.
Oh, it was incredible. I adored the show as well. I thought it was such a privilege to have such a high caliber show about an industry that I work for. It was just like a dream. Some people actually didn't like it. It says like, I don't want to come home, because some of the, let's say, the bad behaviors are still around, a lot of it. Yeah. So some of the kind of like, there aren't a lot of women in positions of power. Guess what? It's probably the case still today. So a lot of people put off watching that stuff because it was too close to work. I basked in it. I watched it. What was going to say? That was even the best bit about it. Believe it or not, we can even kind of go back and trace it, but 6 months to a year before Mad Men, we had sold the 1960s Nouvelle Vague to Stella Artois as the brand world. Like, that's where we're going to shoot everything. So like all the kind of like the French cinema and all that influence and the beautiful 1960s kind of art house cinema. And to then have the show to kind of to just keep updating kind of references and watching beautiful furniture, interior design, wardrobe, hair, makeup, and everything. So although it was in America, but it was just a dream to have that to watch and then to be working on doing that and picking stuff and working in the 60s on Stella as well.
I mean, that's what's that, life imitating art, that kind of thing. I always, by the way, I have always adored the Stella branding I'm no art director, so I cannot give references that are accurate for what it's attempting to imitate, but the kind of rustic, genuine, vintage feel, it all felt very real. I remember were there a series of black and white wartime adverts back in about 2010, 2009 at the cinema? I loved those things, and of course the music is also placed very well on those campaigns, because it's always got this very scratchy violin that feels very that it pairs with the, what do you call it, the degradation of the film. Why did that entire aesthetic seem to you to just match up with Stella Artois?
It was very interesting. The challenge that came to us was that the glorious Stella Artois work of the past, which was more rural European, maybe 1800s, even earlier than that. It was beautiful and it worked a treat, but it had run its course and it wasn't resonating as much. The whole notion of that brilliant line they had before, I think it was Lowe's, reassuringly expensive, was out of quilt with the world, and materialism was becoming a little bit of an undesirable quality when they came to us. So, and also in the UK, it had image problems, with being hijacked by kind of heavy drinkers and getting a horrible nickname. So what we went on to do, which is some of the most cunning, I felt like I was a madman at times, because they said let's update the image. Let's keep the romance, the filmic quality of it, the quality of craft that we always had, but let's update it. Let's bring it closer. And so we started to feel where else can they live? What era does this make sense to be super sophisticated, but have a bit of class, have a bit of finesse? And 60s is so beautiful. So we started to dabble with this. And what we were trying to do back in the day was create such a sophisticated, kind of almost highbrow image for it, that we would do something that we call positive alienation, which is mind trickery. We'll make it so glamorous and cool and artistic and elevated that people that weren't necessarily the people that should be drinking it or drinking too much of it would actually start to feel at odds with the image of it. So a lot of the effort that went into it is to make it feel like this is not a brand for you. Yes.
So is there some risk for the client with that? It's look, you're going to have to lose some friends before you can make some more friends.
Yes, and it was also a no-brainer. You go you don't want to be associated with certain things. You want to be hanging out with a different crowd. And I'm sure, position yourself as a sophisticated continental lager with kind of a bit of Frenchness to it. You're going to make loads of new friends, and it worked. And it worked across the globe as well. Not only the UK, it was a global client. So it was so much fun to work on those things and to have to watch Nouvelle Vague basically as research. I couldn't believe that's what I do for a living.
Yeah, and I also noticed there's a couple of things I want to pick up on here, and I'm going to choose the order in which I do them, because I can already sense, certainly with the way that you think and with the way that I think, the conversation can go in many different directions and I'll forget. But the first one is, I suppose, risk-taking, because I saw you say something at the end of last year, which was, let's see, I was going to try and call it to memory without looking at my notes on my laptop, but I'm not that professional. You said there was already a decay in the level of risk that brands were able to take. What, in your opinion, triggered the decay in risk-taking?
There's so, I think marketeers, well, let me try and start from the right place. I think marketing as a function within organizations this is a massive generalization, but I'll do this just for the sake of this illustration. I think in lots of cases, its role has been diminishing over time. So like as procurement and cost saving, I think this is accelerated in the credit crisis, like crunch, the crisis of 2008. So we've seen that from the very beginning. So marketing started receding into like the kind of like within the kind of like the big boy stable in some organizations. Then the cost controlling start coming in and kind of like clipping their wings a little bit, and then the people that are like the CMOs are lasting in their jobs a lot less time, a lot less longer, and then there's a lot of data, inundation of data. You can measure everything. You check something on social media platform, you can immediate like testing A and B, lots of research, so I think like a perfect storm. It's created a new crop of marketing or leaders that are like really squeezed on the back foot, more transient, less committed. Again, I'm just going to say this massive like generalization. There's so many great examples of incredible professionals, but and then by default, like if you're on the back foot, if you're trying to prove that what you do works, if your CEOs and your CFOs and your COOs are looking at you as a CMO not as an equal, but like someone that needs to kind of grow up and show results and prove that this works, and what is this gut shit? What is the brand building exercise over time? Just don't give me this bullshit. I want results now. It's all much more difficult to make money, blah, 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 blah. So I think that's been happening, eroding over the years. Let's flip a bit. Advertising industry is not doing itself any favors. There's plenty of examples of terrible work, things that shouldn't exist, or, so it's on the other side, the agencies are not helping the cause. So they're not like giving their all, the best, or they're not structured properly to actually meet the new landscape, blah, 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 blah. So I think that's happening. And then you throw COVID into the mix, and then it's just accelerated. Like, people just panic, they receded, contracted. And it's easy for me to say, but sometimes I compare it to us criticizing government. So when crises happen, we all like sitting in our armchairs criticizing government and going like, austerity is bullshit, spend your way out of it. So it's very easy to say, but when it comes to us, marketeers or agencies even, we always contract. So I'm going like, why do we tell them to spend? And then we, at the first sign of difficulty, we cut budgets, we cut personnel, like we just do the opposite. So instinctively, to me, it doesn't make any sense. I think you should be taking risks when everybody else is running away from it, because then there's an open goal. Nobody else is there. Like, that's why we're lucky enough to do some work on KFC early in the pandemic, where we're making people laugh. It was just a dream. The results were so disproportionately huge because no one else is doing anything remotely likely. So I find it like incredible that not many more people think like this or act like this, because it's quite obvious to me. It's just like, why are you running away from it? Anyway, I digress a bit.
Are you a Star Wars fan?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So the end of A New Hope, when Luke has to turn off his targeting system in order to actually hit the target. See where I'm going with that?
Yeah, very good. I was obsessed with Mandalorian in the middle of the pandemic because it's so good.
Yeah, it was one of the things that did get everyone through the pandemic. I remember we were doing a brief for Iris, and it was like sort of 8 p.m. You know how it gets, 8 p.m., 9 p.m. You're still doing work, and I rang up Grant, the ECD, and he was like, "Oh yeah, how you doing? Sorry, we're just glued to the Mandalorian with the kids." So, yeah, absolutely. But I have a feeling that there's some wisdom in that moment, which is to say that if you try and adhere too much to rationality, too much to wanting to be able to predict every single result, you'll be missing something, right? It's the same as the golden snitch in Harry Potter. There's no way of knowing where it is until it just filters into your vision, and then you go after it. Which is that's kind of an analogy for a creative spark, isn't it? Right? It just comes into your field of vision.
Yeah, like fear is the worst kind of like feeling to feed off, when you're trying to do something incredible. Like it's going to prevent you, like it's physically, viscerally shutting down your brain power. So like if you're acting out of fear, you're less potent. Your brain is less potent. So it's just kind of like common sense. Yes, easy to say. Like, I work at an agency that it just thrives on taking risks. It knows how to do them. Like it knows how to calculate some of it. But I feel like this industry is at its best when it's setting off fireworks on behalf of brands that just go so much higher and further than the media that they had to spend. And that's when we add loads of value. And that's when people are like, oh, there is like a bit of like butterfly in the stomach the day before you launch something. Like I know when we're doing something good, the day before I'm a bit anxious, and the morning off I'm on Twitter at 6 a.m. just to kind of see what the reaction is. And like gut isn't valued as much anymore because we have so much data. But I think the best marketeers, they have a really strong instinct, and they will, well, I'll just use IKEA here for 1 second. Our clients, more often than not, will choose the piece that she likes the most, even though it was the least performing in research. Mm-hmm. And a case in point is our IKEA Christmas ads with DEE was the one that scored the least out of 3 that we put in. The client had a hunch, we had a hunch, we made that one, we won.
Yeah. And what accounts for that? And why do things test poorly? And if the testing doesn't actually inform the decision, why test? 3 hard questions, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like it depends on the client, but there are clients that are so tied up with testing structurally for decades that they cannot, like especially global ones, that you cannot make any work, or actually your markets won't buy the work from you globally if it doesn't come with green scores. So that's one. That's like terrible. That's the most difficult place to be. And then the other side of this is different. I'm not a big fan of research. I think there's plenty of brains in the room that are being really well paid to just freaking make the right decision. So I believe it, like, come on, guys, between us, we can do this. But the other side of it, when it's still needed, for whatever reason, there is a bit of qual research that is to get a sense of tone and to get a sense of direction of travel of stuff, to see, hey, just triple check that we're not being tone deaf, like that we're not doing something completely alienating that might like anger the hell out of everybody. So, or we have 2 ways of doing this thing. Let's figure out like which one is more successful. And that is actually quite a nice little privilege. You have a little round of stuff that you expose to people that are not from advertising. You take it with a massive pinch of salt. You're still making the decision in the end, but you gained a bit of nuance and texture. So that one I don't mind as much. The one that is like, it's like, what are we doing here? Like, if we still need those guys, like 500 people, they're probably not paying a lot of attention to it, to just click on the button and give us a green score. Like I think we failed when we have to do that.
Yes. And also we know that, or not we know, I certainly suspect that, I think it's a truism, isn't it? I can't remember who said it. It's a designer that said a camel is a horse designed by committee. And that's the idea, right? It's like we're trying to create something elegant and beautiful. And the more people you involve, there's too much taste to get diluted down.
I'm going to steal that one. I love it.
Yeah, well, it's I wish it was mine, but yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, so moving on, using that same theme and moving on to music, which is, of course, it's my first love, and it sounds really interestingly like it was yours with regards to jingles. I'm interested to know as well, why didn't you go into music if the jingles caught your attention so much?
I tried to kind of like, again, I've been trying to write that bit of my story a bit better, but I don't remember as well. We were so young, like kids, literally. I think is a mixture of things. I always love to draw, and I love the jingles and the adverts. My dad and mom and dad were shop owners, so there's a lot of commercialism like in the house. So we've seen them working hard and how to make money, and we worked at the shop at times, and the they grew. Then at a point they had a few shops. So we were quite like aware of the commercial side of things. And although I didn't love the environment of their shops, I did love the side of it where I got to see numbers and things like that. So I had that side in my brain and the more artistic side. And I thought that advertising was the perfect kind of match. Like you could do a bit of the artistic side, but you're also going to do the commercial side. So it was like, wow, I get to do both things. And it felt like it was such a glamorous profession in Brazil back then that it was almost a problem. It was like, people were ending up doing advertising course when they didn't know what else to do. That was the degree of the success of the industry in Brazil back then. So it was overcrowded with a bunch of I actually lost my first placement. I was doing really well. And it was cut short because at the time, the daughter of a A-list soap opera TV star from Brazil wanted a job in that agency and they took my seat. I got really angry, but that's the degree of how coveted the industry was. The music, we'll talk a lot more, I would assume, but I think that I figured out there would be music in that job as well. So I feel like I can have that, my cake and eat it.
So you figured out the music would be an aspect of the advertising gig and that was sufficient?
It was, yeah. And I'll do a detour here because I think this is quite interesting. There's the agency that I used to work back then. It was a place called W Brazil. It was named after the founder. The founder is called Washington Oliveto. He's one of the most successful advertising stars in the world. And he is notorious for having made a career out of great tracks in advertising. So he actually was so successful, and that he ended up becoming friends with all of the musicians, all of the composers, all of the singers, songwriters, the bands. He ended up, or the agency's name ended up in one very famous song that the chorus had the name of the agency. It became really famous. So that influence was also quite strong. And this guy just launched a podcast. Sadly, it's in Portuguese. So, but I listened to the second episode this morning, and it was about accidental tracks that ended up in some of his work, because it's so much about music that he's even got a chapter that is about accidental great tracks that he listened when traveling that ended up becoming out. So the influence that I had in advertising wasn't just like the jingles, it was spectacular tracks in ads. And I figured that I could, I ended up having the chance to use great tracks in my ads as well. But that was when I felt I could have a lot of music in my life by going into advertising as well.
So this brings us on to one of the questions I've been very eager to ask. Well, everyone I know in the industry, really. And this is because our business, we compose. We also, we do the other stuff, search, sync, sound design. But composition was the initial spark that we've got to get into that. And advertising is obviously, it's a very sync-heavy domain. We like finding the right track. And to tie it into the theme of risk-taking, I was just really keen to get your opinion on why it is that we are so fond of syncing a known track, because it obviously has an emotional connection already. If it's a famous track, we already know how people are going to feel about it. And it feels like, brands aren't willing to take the risk of having a new piece of music concocted for the brand that will be ownable by them.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I've watched some of the other episodes, so I knew this was coming. But a very well-known track, when it's really well used, is a massive boost to your chances of succeeding, of course. But so many cases, I think probably more often than not, when it's not a good fit, so it's essentially like ham-fisted into it. So you have the worst of both worlds. You have like a great track that's been massacred into an ad, and an ad that deserved a better fit being trampled over by a famous track. And I think that's the worst that can happen. And I think it happens a lot, actually, because it's easy to go there, I suppose. You play a great track, a client will know it, it's easier to sell.
You'll feel good because you have the association.
exactly. You go like, I use that track, and I heard, and I think one of Rory Sutherland's episodes, you're talking about the cost of it as well. I mean, come on, it's getting ridiculous.
Yeah.
I can't sometimes take those costs to my clients with a straight face. I can't. I love their businesses as well. I can't just make them spend those. And I think sometimes it's out of laziness or cutting corners, and it's just like we run out of time. I think scoring is so. I think it's quite fulfilling, like to do something bespoke. I genuinely love it. I think it's well, I do a bit of the detour here, like because I got into Succession really, really late, and I was off on holidays a couple of weeks ago, and I just watched the whole of the 2 series and in one go. And God, the classical, the theme tune to that thing is glorious. I think it's, for me, I mean, I love the characters, I love the writing, I love everything, but I think the music is half of the reason why I adore the thing. It went from being a great series to me being like one of my favorite things ever because of music. So they made the effort, they put in, and great films do that so spectacularly well. They do score it, and they'll use the theme to just kind of like carry the thing and different notes and different bits. So yeah, we are doing something quite big at the moment that we're scoring, and I'm super excited. And it's multiple pieces, so we're getting to flex it. So like, yeah, I'm in heaven.
That brings me on to something else that I've been meaning to ask you, which is that I sense a, dare I say, like a frustrated filmmaker in you. Is that something that you have ever attempted or are maybe thinking about attempting one day, trying to venture into the world of motion picture?
Oh my God, yes! Like I dream of. I've had a few dabbles with, but not as the filmmaker, but as I didn't know what an exec producer was until I did it. So I had this. Actually, one of the proudest moments of my career is actually nothing to do with advertising. So this guy that I know, that was like one of our in-house editor at Mother, went over to Brazil, got married to a Brazilian woman, and then met an incredible character there in a slum, in a favela, and filmed his story, and came back to London with this kind of like hours and hours and hours of footage, and he didn't know what to do. He wanted to cut into a short film, and he gave me this really bloated kind of like chunk of stuff to watch it, and I took it home. I spent a few hours watching it. I loved it. I came back and I said, like, okay, the story is really dramatic. This guy is starting a boxing school to take kids out of the favela and the life of crime, because he hasn't seen a single male adult in his family die of natural causes. All of them die by gun violence. So I said, like, I'm gonna put all the weight of Mother behind this, my own personal time. I'm gonna make this happen. So I called around, got favors, I got all like Mother's computers for him to edit, people to help. I got like my art directors to do posters, to do all the signage. I got like designers to create the logo for the boxing school, got MPC to grade, like people to do sound, music, to go after the rights for music. So we made the film, and I was so happy because it was a good cause, because we made it. And then one morning I wake up with a message on my phone, like lots of missed calls and a message, and I knew they were in New York for a Tribeca Film Festival, and I couldn't understand, but they're just chanting that we won the prize of best short. And the end of the story is way happier than this. The school took off. We got sponsorship for decades to come. There's 500 kids there now. It's a brilliant story. So that was my first dabble into the world of movies. It's a 16 minutes long. I'll send it to you later. Sorry for doing a plug here, but I'm so proud of that. And then my second little story in film, that's very peculiar. So Emerald Fennell, that just won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay, is married to advertising copywriter that used to work at Mother. And her directing debut was a little short film that we done together. It's called Careful How You Go. she was trying to get like funding to make that film. We got Mother to put up the cash. She had a brilliant cast, like Phoebe Waller-Bridge was cast in it as well. It was a dream, really. And then literally, when I opened that script to read, like I never seen anything so well written in my life. Like that's some of the. It was just like so easy to read. It was so beautifully written. I'm not surprised that she's won. I think she's going to win like several times over because she's a brilliant writer. So we backed that film. It's a great little film. It's very dramatic. The theme is not dissimilar to Promising Young Women. It's kind of like women seeking revenge. It's just really, really wonderful. And we got an official Sundance selection for that as well. So I've been in the world of cinema twice, and twice I got so lucky that I got this thing. So I'm a very, very happy person.
Wow. So lightning does strike twice in that context, eh?
I can't believe it.
Well, that's really, I think it's, yours is one of the ultimate success stories in that respect. So, hopefully there are some people who are going to be able to watch this and draw from it that you can have it all, that you can get the career, you can have the marriage, you can do the dream side hustle, be partner of this huge agency. Is there anything that you would maybe be so bold as to say what your secret is? How have you achieved all of this? It's a very difficult question, so I don't envy you answering it.
No, like honestly, it will sound cliche, but the beginning was really, really hard. Like there's no genius in here. Like there's nothing. It was like really, really like relentless perseverance. Like really, like trying. There's one when I convinced Ana to come and work with me again. The way I tell it now, it sounds like it was all like all rosy and cool. It was a really, really, really difficult moment. Like we were laying in bed, looking at the ceiling, going like, on paper, we're actually quite smart. Like, why is it that both of us are struggling so bloody much? Like, what are we doing wrong? And I think, well, we've been together for such a long time. I think that was a bit of the secret. Like when we joined forces again, I think we had this impetus. Like we have a beef. Like we have something to prove. We're better than this. We're spinning in place. This has to happen. So when it did happen, it was this pent up, a bit of anger, a bit of energy, but it was like all like ferocious, like so much so that we sold the script first. We made the ad. We got loads of awards for it. So it was all just built inside. So first thing was like, if you believe that you want to do that thing genuinely, for as hard as it can be, and I was running out of money, all those sorts of things you can imagine, don't quit if you can. Hold in, like hang in there. And the second one is I think is the thing that I was talking about, fine-tuning Mother. It's a job. It's like it's bloody advertising. Just have a laugh. Don't take it too serious. Don't take it personally. Of course, work your socks off, but don't let it invade your life and all sorts of things. So have a life, fill your head with great stuff and stick at it. Like it will work out. And I think this, God forbid, my mom doesn't speak English, so she will never see or hear this, hopefully. But I miss my family dearly. Like it's so bad now, COVID. We haven't been back to visit. We normally go once a year. We stay for quite a while. We haven't been back for a year and a half now. It's getting quite painful. But not having all of that distraction, drama, and all those obligations that come with family being nearby, it was a flip side of the sadness that is to live like away from them all, is that you have time for yourself, like to focus on things and to dedicate. So we've been really, really relentlessly focused on this until our little 5-year-old came along and then just wrecked the whole rhythm of the thing.
And how's that journey been?
It's like Ana and I had given so many interviews about how the hell can you work and be husband and wife, work together as a creative team. And people were surprised when we answered, like, it's actually not that hard. Like as long as you're not at each other's throats and you're not blending too much work and life and work, you'll be fine. Because as long hours, guess what? what wrecks relationships when one is working late and the other is waiting at home. We never work because we're both either working late or we're at home together. Second, advertising involves a lot of traveling. Guess what wrecks relationships? When one is on the road and the other one is staying. We're both traveling together all the time, doing everything. So I think it was an advantage versus like a lot of people think, how we will kill each other. So like, you won't. You actually like join forces and then by the time he came along, we were quite settled. We got made ECDs when Anna was pregnant. She was like maybe 4 months pregnant. So when he was born, we were like a few months into being ECDs. And so we had quite stabilized the whole thing. So we were in control of our life. And so it was easier to then deal with the fact that we wouldn't be able to go on shoots together, if ever, because I don't get to go on shoots anymore. But we wouldn't need to be so close together because we had done it already. So we had, to a certain extent, succeeded. So it was easy when he came along.
Well, I can't really think of, many more appropriate places to take it after that, because, it's like we've done a pleasant circle there. We started with how it started, and we've gone back to that moment and now where it's going. So I hope that we can do this again in the future. It'd be great to get you and Anna in the room and do one of these. That'd be amazing. And maybe even the little one as well. I'm sure there's some good insights to come out of out of the mouths of babes.
Oh my God, do you get the real insights from that one? He's already a master of branding and advertising.
Yeah.
I think he thinks he works for KFC already.
Do you ever show him the stuff and be like, so what do you think of this? We're going to show it to the client, but you need to see it first.
He sees everything. He sees it from scamps to finished products. So he's like this weird kid that knows animatics, that he knows like storyboards, and he gets to see the Greenpeace animations as well, like from beginning to end. So he's seen Rangtang and he's seen like Monster in the Kitchen now. So he knows the stages of animation.
I mean, how rare is that? So, no, brilliant stuff. Is there anything else you'd like to get in before we close off? Any plugs or any what would I say? Any people that you feel you'd like to mention? It's a huge thing.
I mean, I talked a lot about Anna, so I don't need to do it. I think it's like she's the real rock behind this whole thing, stabilizing both of us. But I honestly, thank you for having me. I still, even though like I got a great job and a great career, sometimes I don't believe that I'm being invited to do podcasts. So I feel always grateful.
No, it's been one of my favorites so far. So thanks for coming on.